Let me ask you this: you're just reading articles about the shut down, slim down, whatever people want to call it. The fact that 9 out of 10 IRS workers have been sent home, but there's still 1.35 million still on the job, which means there's a lot of non-essential IRS workers apparently. But let me ask you: is there any danger? Do you think this is a long shot with the media's one-sided coverage of these sorts of things? Is there any danger that the American people will simply say, after whatever a couple of weeks, well, I like the slimmed down government. Let's let them stay home. Any danger that the American people are going to do that?
Well, one can hope, right? I mean, I don't know. It is a very difficult atmosphere that we're all operating in now because the media bias is so overwhelming. And even if the average American isn't feeling any pain from the government shutdown, if the media tells them that other Americans are in pain, that other Americans are hurting, other Americans are being denied food aid or whatever it is, the American people are such good and decent people that they're likely to be against the shutdown because they don't want their neighbors, their fellow citizens to be harmed. I've been trying to explain to folks that this is not some odd thing, a government shutdown. In the last 35 years, there have been 17 of these. There were 5 or 6 of them during the Reagan administration when Tip O'Neill, the famous Democrat from Massachusetts, was running the House of Representatives. Nobody presented Tip O'Neill as being a terrorist or obnoxious because he was forcing a government shutdown until Reagan did what he wanted. But man, now, if conservatives in Congress try to use this tool, the American people are being told that this is going to destroy the country, make us all unsafe, thousands will starve. I mean, it's the most hyperventilated rhetoric I've seen in a long time.
Gary, the House of Representatives is trying to push through a series of mini spending bills or whatever you want to call it, to fund just different parts of things that were shut down. You think that's a good strategy for the Republicans, and how do you think that'll play out?
Well, I do think it's a good strategy. For example, a lot of Americans have vacations scheduled where they're going to national parks around the country, like Yellowstone and so forth. So the Republicans have put through an appropriations bill that will provide the money for the parks. The Republicans actually passed a bill that will provide money for everything in the federal government other than Obamacare. So it's really the president that's chosen to shut the government down, but that's not the way it's being presented. I do think this is a good idea. They're going to do that today, and unfortunately, Harry Reid in the Senate has already said he will not allow it to be voted on, and the president has said if it is voted on and passes, he will veto it.
Gary, let me ask you this. Just going to the strategy at the outset here by the GOP to link the continuing resolution to the funding of Obamacare. Do you think that strategy was wise?
I think reasonable conservatives can disagree on the strategy. My concern was that, as someone said, it's sort of a box canyon. If you fly into a box canyon, one end of that canyon is a brick wall, and unless you pull up quickly, you end up crashing into it. I kept asking people, what's the exit game? What if the president just digs his heels in, as he is wont to do, and just refuses to negotiate, and the media carrying the water for him describes this in a way that makes it sound like it's the fault of conservatives. And nobody had a good end game, and I think we've seen that just in the few days that this has happened. But look, I understand the frustration of conservatives around the country who elected a lot of new members of Congress and don't want Obamacare, and unfortunately they just haven't elected enough conservatives for the Congress reasonably to be able to do very much about it.
Some have suggested that whether it's this way or some other way, that Republicans should just simply make the Democrats fully own this Obamacare train wreck, as has been described by Democrats even. And so I want to ask you about. We had Congressman Alan Nunley on at the top of the hour, previous hour. And I asked him the same question that I'm going to ask you, because the president, my understanding, the president has on 17 occasions unilaterally authorized changes, delays, for example, with the employer mandate, the part of the Obamacare that would apply to employers. And he has made these changes, and I want to get your opinion because it's now being challenged by Judicial Watch. Has the president acted lawfully? When a law is passed, does the president have the constitutional authority, have other presidents used this authority to simply say, well, we're going to postpone that part of the law, or we're going to change this, or I'm going to give this group a waiver? Has the president acted constitutionally?
Well, that obviously is a key question, and I think it's one of the reasons Americans are so frustrated about Washington is that it's not always easy to give a direct answer. We all remember that the Obamacare legislation was over 3,000 pages long, and that alone was troubling. I mean, why in the world would you need 3,000 pages to provide health insurance for Americans that don't have it? Usually in legislation, the executive branch is given some discretion to react to changing circumstances. So certainly there would be some things that the president could do after the law is passed that would be lawful. But on things like the deadlines for when the law is implemented, usually that's pretty clear. And a president can't willy-nilly say, well, I'm going to ignore this deadline but insist on that deadline. But because it's 3,000 pages, it will have to be sorted out in a lawsuit, and that adds to the frustration because our legal system was set up by the founders to work slowly, and it's quite possible that we won't get a final court decision on whether he had that discretion or not until literally he's no longer president of the United States.
Well, let me ask you this in terms of the frustration of the American people. We had the opening of those state exchanges yesterday, and as expected, there were glitches. People, even on television, MSNBC and others, trying to walk people through it, and they're on air, and they're saying, well, they won't let me do this, won't let me do that. The Democrats are saying, and the president is saying, well, look, this is a huge program. Admittedly, there will be glitches, but we'll sort these things out. I use the example with Congressman Nunley that probably for a lot of Americans that makes sense. They work in places with computers. They have to call the IT guy to come up. My computer's not working. It's crashed. They probably understand those kind of things happen. But is that an accurate picture as far as what you're hearing around Washington? Is that an accurate picture? Are these just temporary glitches? Or is this the train wreck beginning to unfold like some silent movie, one of those black and white movies where you see the train begin to go off the track? This is going to be a big one. Which do you think it is?
Well, I think there's a little bit of both. I mean, certainly you're right. We've all had problems with our computers, et cetera. Although I must say the Obama administration had 3 years to prepare to have this software done correctly. They certainly seem to be very adept at using computers when it's their own political campaign. But they weren't able to do it in this case. In my view, these glitches may be solved, but the real glitch is the law itself, because the glitch, quote unquote, is that it transfers away from the American people their right to conduct their health care the way they see fit. And I believe that is a train wreck. I believe with each day more and more Americans will realize that liberty has been taken away. They're actually going to be paying more for health care. And in addition to paying for their own health care, they're going to be paying penalties and all sorts of other things to pay for other people's health care. And so I believe, unlike some of my conservative friends, that even though this thing's being implemented, it does not mean the battle's over. I think there could be enough anger a year from now that we might even have a better chance to repeal it then.
We're talking to Gary Bauer, who's chairman for Working Families Political Action Committee and president of American Values. Gary, let me ask you one more D.C.-centered question, then we'll move to the international scene and get your view on some things happening outside the U.S. What do you think is going to happen in a couple of weeks? We have the debt ceiling. That's always a fun time in Washington, D.C. What do you think is going to happen then if we're still in government shutdown / slim down, and now Democrats and Republicans have to come together to do something about the debt ceiling?
I think you could see a replay of what we're witnessing right now because, yes, the president did win re-election, but many Republican congressmen were sent to Washington too, and so both of them have constituencies that voted for them, and the Republicans feel that they have to get more savings out of the budget so that the American taxpayer is not being constantly asked to send more of their money to Washington. And the president and his allies are committed to the exact opposite. They want government to continue to grow and get larger. When people say, why won't they compromise? Well, just think about that. One side wants smaller government. The other side wants bigger government. What's the compromise? It's either going to grow or it's going to get smaller. So some of these things don't lend themselves to compromise. So I think we're going to see more and more gridlock this year and into 2014. And then in November of 2014, you've got a third of the Senate up for election and all of the House of Representatives, and the American people will have a chance either to give Obama majorities in the House and more of a majority in the Senate, which would give him a blank check, or they've got a chance to help conservatives win control of the Senate and keep the House, which basically I think would then send a strong signal that the public is dissatisfied in the direction the president's taking us.
Gary, recently the President of the United States took a phone call from one of the leaders of Iran, a country who has just called for the total annihilation of Israel and terrorist country, and we know all about all that. But after that phone call, he was encouraged that there could be some movement towards the nuclear side of what Iran is doing. Shouldn't we all be just rejoicing that he took that phone call and everything's all going to be good?
No, exactly the opposite, as I know your question's tone insinuated. This new leader of Iran, Rouhani, is not really new at all. I mean, he's been around for decades, and he has a very clear record. He's much more adept in how to play the PR game than Ahmadinejad was. Ahmadinejad, as your listeners will probably remember, was a Holocaust denier. He denied there was such a thing, that 6 million Jews died in it. Rouhani was asked in an interview on, I think, ABC a few weeks ago, did he think the Holocaust happened? And his response was, well, I'm not an historian. You'll have to check with historians about that. So he made sure he didn't give them a headline, and in fact, it was cut out of the interview. But this is a wily guy, and he knows Iran is very close to reaching their dream, which is nuclear weapons that they can use to threaten us, threaten Israel, threaten our allies in the Middle East. And if they get those nuclear weapons, that's going to be a disaster not only for Israel, but it will be a disaster for the American people too.
Well, and of course, Iran, as well as other occurrences in the Middle East, have kind of been overshadowed in this country with the budgetary and Obamacare controversies that have just been dominating the headlines. So put on your thinking cap, look into your crystal ball, all sorts of other old metaphors. What do you think is going to happen with Iran? Do you think that they'll basically slide under the radar and get nuclear weapons, or do you think that they are going to make a deal?
I think the president desperately wants a deal, President Obama. I think because of that, there may very well be the potential for it, because it certainly will suit Rouhani of Iran. It will suit his